Welcome to the Positively No Gambling Podcast, a pro football show that is definitely not about betting. My name is Glenn Fraser. It is Saturday, August 23rd, and this is the 2025 team preview for the New Orleans Saints. Oh boy, this is going to be a fun one. So, format, we review two big questions from the start of the offseason, recap 2024, preview 2025, take a look at some stats, trends, early against the spread leans, conclude on those two big questions, give out a preliminary over-under pick for the win totals for the season. The final pick for the Saints and all 32 teams will be part of the AFC and NFC preview, which we'll post right before the season starts. So, with that, let's dive into the Saints. And this is a really tough one to come up with two questions about, very similar to the Browns. Can they overhaul an entire team with a bunch of caveats to that, given their cap situation? And, is this hopeless, at least for this season? I think you could. Uh, I think you know where we're going with both of these, but let's recap. So 24, 5 and 12, dead last in the South, missed the playoffs, fired the coach, lost their quarterback who retired. They started off 2 and 0, which they were flying high, and if you bet them, you love them. I bet them these first two games and was very happy with the outcome. And then after that, things just fell off a cliff. Rock bottom was probably this week 7 against Denver. I think that was a Thursday night. They had backups all over the field, and it was just a disaster. And things really never recovered there. They were 0 and 9 against playoff teams. They had a tough schedule, but not a brutal schedule. A little bit unlucky in terms of who they ended up playing versus how they expected their schedule to turn out. When we get to the efficiency numbers, they technically underachieved by a couple of wins. So was this a 7 and 10 team, not a 5 and 12 team? It's debatable. They were awful. 2 and 6 in one score games, just a terrible situation, terrible season. Cap, all that's been said. So with that, let's move on to what the offense should look like this year. Obviously, all new head coach, new coordinators on both sides, new quarterback. But let's talk about what they lost. Derek Carr retired, which debatable as to whether that's a lateral move or a downgrade. MVS went to Seattle. That was not a huge loss. A couple of other minor losses on the offense. They drafted Tyler Shuck, who is expected to start, possibly end up being a backup to start the season, but you don't draft a guy like that, given the quarterback room, and not expect to play him. So he will be starting by the midseason at the latest, I would say. He was actually their second round pick. Their first round pick was Calvin Banks Jr., the tackle, who by all accounts seems like a very safe, good pick. They added Brandon Cooks, returning to them, right, coming over from Dallas. Drafted Devin Neal, added Cam Akers from Minnesota, Dylan Redunds from Tennessee, backup type guy. Um, Not a ton here. Their center is pretty good. Eric McCoy. Olave, when he's healthy, is pretty dynamic. I'll put Banks in as a high potential. So if glass half full, even though their right tackle's not tremendous, but glass half full, this could be a decent line. Um, Shuck, I remember the build up to the draft, a lot of late buzz around him. There are a couple of rabbis he has, a couple advocates that really like him in the NFL media at least. So we'll see. It was a weak QB draft, and he was the what third quarterback drafted. So not a huge, not huge expectations coming into the season with Chuck, but worth a shot, I guess, if you're the Saints, given the hell that you're in with your salary cap. It's not really make or break, given how everybody's new, but God, the pressure is if the Saints want to surprise anybody, they need to do it with their offense, and you kind of can maybe see it in the right matchups. We'll get to the matchups in a minute here. Their defense. Okay, so Tyrann Mathieu retired. They lost Paulson Adebo to the Giants. Will Harris, safety, to the Commanders. They've added nose tackle Devon Godshaw, came over from New England. I think that was a trade. Justin Reed, starting safety from Kansas City. Julian Blackman, starting safety from Indy. Isaac Yiadom comes over from San Francisco. He'll probably back up Kool-Aid McKinstry, sorry. Then there were a bunch of other transactions, including the draft, which will help fill in some of the rotational guys here. In terms of blue chippers, Demario Davis is a heck of an inside linebacker. Carl Granderson's a talented will linebacker. Beyond that, they don't have a ton in terms of their pass rush. They re-signed Chase Young. He's been sort of a disappointment, but he's expected to start. Um, X factor, the if Kool-Aid McKinstry can live up and keep upgrading and leveling up, you pair him with maybe you've hit one of your draft picks in the secondary, maybe one or both of your safeties and free agency hit. I could see an improved secondary. Maybe given the division that they're in, they don't necessarily need to have an elite secondary. Um, I don't know. They play the Bucks close. They play Atlanta close. Usually, you got to rack up some wins in division. Not a ton of talent. This is definitely not the worst defense you see in the league, but mix a very mediocre defense with a very mediocre offense, and you probably get a pretty rough team. Let's look at their schedule. The one silver lining with this team is their schedule. It is literally the least amount of playoff teams you can possibly play given your schedule, um, because they are playing the AFC East, which only got one team in, the NFC West, which only got one team in. So you only have to play the Bills. Now it's in Buffalo. You only have to play the Rams in Buffalo, in Los Angeles, sorry. And then you're playing the Bucks twice, which you always play them. So this is a quite easy looking schedule, including the easiest or the second easiest at worst home schedule, right? So those difficult games are on the road. You're getting the Giants at home, the Pats at home, the Jets at home. Those are three gettable games, and you're going to need to win those games. Now, they're not great at home against the spread, so this could be a lot more difficult than advertised. Now, I will say they're going to be a huge underdog in a lot of these games on the road. They could end up being a spoiler. I would never take them to win in Seattle, for example, or in Miami, for example, but they'll be healthy dogs in these games. And I could definitely see them covering numbers, keeping up in the first half, maybe roaring back in the second half, that type of thing. They're not as you could use this team to spoil some things, and in the right spot, they'll be worth betting on as a dog. Looking into the advanced stats, nothing really jumps out here. We talked about the Pythagorean wins for his actual wins, 6.9 versus 5. A lot of that was skewed by a couple of those early games where they were just blowing out teams, which was completely unsustainable. So I don't really give that much merit. 2-6 in close games, not great. Turnover differential and fumbles, that should revert. The win decrease from 23 to 24, they lost four more games in 2024. Does that plummet even further? Does that even out? Does that revert? If it does revert, then maybe this team could be an over candidate. Strength schedule, talked about a lot easier looking. They had bad luck with the schedule last year. O line, they were bad at pass protection. They've addressed that in the draft. Hopefully, they improve in pass protection, and they were pretty good at run protection, but we looked at their running backs. Is that going to matter? Bad D line. That's where they're going to get destroyed, you would think, with the matchups in 25. Cup very minimal, but did find a couple of leans for against the spread. Week 14, now look, who the heck knows what this team's going to look like by week 14. But right now they're 9.5 point dogs against the Bucks. They play them close. They're so familiar with them. I think that's a worthy bet as an underdog. And then week 16 against the Jets, they're a small favorite, the Saints, but I don't think much of the Jets. So if there's ever going to be a team to take them as a favorite, it's the Jets. Some indicators of positive regression, especially with the schedule, um, but not overwhelming here. This is certainly not one that the media and everybody has gotten totally wrong. I don't think very much of this team. So, did they address their two big questions, which were, can you overhaul an entire team? Probably not. Is this hopeless? I put not so fast. I don't know if it's hopeless. A lot of people just think are writing this team in, penciling them in as the worst team in the league, which I certainly account for here. And I am going to go under 5.5. I know it's such a small number. I probably won't bet this, but this roster does seem pretty hopeless. It's a lot to ask a rookie quarterback, especially one that you drafted in the second round, to come in and lead a team to victory. But I will want an excuse to bet this team this year. They're going to be big underdogs a lot. And this is the type of team that you could actually use to your advantage when gambling. But right now, the over under is just a little bit too wonky, so I'm not going to take the over. I will take the under. But it's worth looking at New Orleans from a big time double digit type favorite, especially on the road, as just a cover, a salvage, not get embarrassed. This is a proud franchise, proud team. They play in a stadium where, you can't phone it in, you can't give anything less than full effort, or you're going to be just run out of town. Um, Looking at some of the look ahead lines that I didn't highlight, um, they play the Rams in Los Angeles week 9. I'm looking at plus 10.5 right now. That's that's a nice number. Couple of other ones, 13.5 at Buffalo. That's probably the right line there, so I wouldn't touch that one. Oh, here's a good one. 8.5. They're week 7, they're 8.5 point dogs in Chicago. I mean, come on. You really think Chicago's blowing anybody out this year? I don't. So that's another worthy one. Potentially, along with week 10 in Carolina, they were a 5.5 point dog. This is a team that might be worth betting, but I wouldn't place any of those bets yet because there's just too many question marks. Okay, so that concludes the Saints. Tomorrow we will have the first of the New York teams, the Giants. So it's New York Day tomorrow, and then New York Day after that with the Jets. So that concludes the Saints. Thanks.